Welcome to Heart Change You live stream, where we really dive into topics to hopefully enable people, to equip people to step through some of those hoops where you've been looking at a situation, you're like, how do I overcome? How do I get a breakthrough in this area? There's just so many things that are plaguing our world these days, everything, depression, hopelessness, to then you throw in the drugs and you throw in all kinds of codependencies, which is where we are today. And today's topic is called When Helping Hurts. And we'll dive into that in a minute. Let me do a couple of programming notes. On October 15th is our next Living Acts time, and Brianna Smith is going to be sharing a testimony. And so hopefully many of you will join her there at 6 p.m. on the 15th. And then we do have our next retreat coming up. Check out the livefreeministries.com website for that information, and you can sign up there, but that's October 27 through 29, and then November 4th we have a graduation coming up. So we have many things in the works over the next few weeks. And Rebecca, it's so great to have you join us.
Be here. Thank you.
We are on a topic that you could say that you know a little bit about, so to speak. You might have experienced that a little bit here and there along the way. It's called When Helping Hurts. It's in the area of codependency. One of the most difficult things is, when do I speak? When do I be quiet? When do I need to be firm? When do I just need to love and accept? I mean, those are just for starters. How do I respond? And many times in the area of codependency, there's just almost an instinct of caring. There is a softness of a heart. There is but I have to do this. I need to do this. These are all phrases that take over the codependent. And I'm sure that might have experienced a few of those, if not all of those, somewhere along the line. Talk to me about what that looks like and feels like inside of you, first of all. Just talk about I'm going to call it compulsion. When you're there, you see a situation, you just feel compelled, you feel driven. And again, my language, it comes back to, it feels right. Your conscience says you have to do it. But just talk about that place of compulsivity where you're in there and I got to do this.
Well, I get stuck a lot on, why would I not? It's not putting me out. I can, good at it, from my point of view. And so that's where I get stuck and trying to put boundaries up of where is this actually hurting? Am I giving more than I realize I am? And then exhausted at whatnot. And then how to be still long enough instead of just jumping it, and so that I can hear God, and because that makes a world of difference in the outcome.
One of the phrases that I use is, your greatest strength will be your greatest weakness. And I love, when you said there, it's like, I'm good at it. I have this ability. That means I need to do it.
Right.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. So your greatest strength, we all tend to look at our gift area, and it's like, it's exactly what you said. Well, I'm good at this. I can do this for this person. Of course I need to do this. It feels right. It's instinctive.
Yes. Yeah. So just a matter of being still.
Can you give an example of where that instinct kicked in and, everything in you said, yeah, I need to do this, but later on you were able to step back and look at that and go, okay, this was not the smartest move I've ever made?
That's usually with my mouth.
Okay.
So because I have advice to give or whatnot, and what I found is that God keeps taking me back, that I'm meddling. I'm trying to control and do things that isn't fitting for what His purpose is.
It is interesting. The person on the other end does feel controlled, manipulated. I mean, you may be saying the perfect right thing.
Right.
But in the case of being mom, sometimes you're not the perfect right person.
Right.
because there's a lot of baggage, a lot of other things going on there where it's like, even if it's the right thing to say, they're not going to hear it from me.
Yeah, and that's what, like, having a couple kids in the program, that was a hard thing to, like, especially because sometimes I know things, or I know how things work or whatnot, and I needed to let go and just let them walk that path, or somebody else come alongside them. It wasn't my job.
Little bit different, but the same. I again have developed a lot of skill through the years, a lot of ability to work with people and say, help them diagnose, dissect, to where it's like, here's what's going on, here's how you're responding, here's the next step, etc. And all of that's good. And so exactly what you're saying, I see someone, it's like, I'm ready to dive in. But what's so incredibly important, if that person for some reason is offended at me, it's like their entire filter just changes. Everything about it it changes. They're going to see it through a lens that is not going to be good. Years ago, I developed this saying that anything you say can or will be twisted, multiplied, turned sideways and backwards, and then used against you.
Yeah.
I mean, so when the other person is offended at you, when there's something going on between the two of you that just changed the filter, you actually can know what to do, know how to do, maybe even know seemingly when to say it, and it's still going to be received wrong and going to mess things up.
So then what would I do? I mean, because there's lots of those.
What you do at that point, as you said, would be wait.
Yeah.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I've had to learn when people are offended at me, or there's other conditions, anyway, but offense is the easiest one. When they're there, what I recognize is exactly what I just said. Anything I say is going to be twisted, misused, wrongly received. The only thing you can do, recognize you're powerless.
Yeah.
And at that point, you step back and you're like, wow, I would love to say something, but I really can't. Generally, what I try to do in that circumstance, but even this can get twisted, is just some sort of affirmation of, hey, I do care about you. I want to be able to be here for you. I want to be able to help you. I would do some kind of basic affirmation like that, but the majority of the time, the most powerful thing you can do at that point is not engage in any significant way, definitely not with any advice.
And to remember that we respond out of our wounds.
Mm-hmm. Well, I use the language, you see from inside of wherever you are.
Uh-huh.
And where you are at any given moment can have spiritual dynamics. I believe that when you're offended, it's like there's a spiritual dynamic there that just puts a complete filter, a complete cover over things. And so that person who is offended literally is going to hear everything you say through that filter. So if I recognize that, now I recognize less is more. I step back. I try to do something positive, something affirming that is the least likely to be taken out of context, or sometimes not at all. And then the other thing that I do in that is, again, I don't necessarily give up. I try to be what I would call strategic. Many times there are other people who aren't in that offense zone, who potentially could talk to them, and sometimes you can visit with them and just say, hey, can you get with so-and-so and talk to them? Or again, you look at that from a strategic standpoint where you're trying to find out, okay, I'm powerless, and in fact, not just powerless, I'm negative impact. Mm-hmm. Anything I say can or will be twisted, used against me, and will probably push them in the other direction. So what else is there that might make a difference?
And then how would I not be in, so to say, victim mode? I mean, because then, you know, kind of where I'm going with that.
That's a great question. I guess the first thing you have to do is just look in the mirror and say, I cannot walk in self-pity. I cannot walk in victim status. If you go there, and to me, this is the most powerful piece that I talk about on this one. Just like an offense, unforgiveness, bitterness will block the presence of God, will block the help of God, will block the voice of God. If I go into self-pity, victim mode, that will absolutely block my access to God, my ability to hear from God, to be strengthened by God. If there's ever a time that you need that strength, it's when a loved one is in a very negative place and you're a caregiver and you want to be able to give that care. If you ever needed God's strength, it's there.
Right.
And so a lot of it's just very practical. It's just like, if I go here, this is what will happen. It will block God. I will go into a depressive state. I will go into a self-hatred. I will slice and dice myself. And you put all that together, and I absolutely will have no ability to help this person anytime soon.
Because then it can get me to a place that I'm not even helping myself.
Absolutely. And that's where you have to be able to step back and say, oh, if I care about this person, I cannot go here. I cannot go into victim status. And sometimes you really are the victim. Sometimes you are being treated badly. And so it would be easy to go there because it's true. And we've already used that verse a few times here recently. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. Well, just because it's true, and just because, let's go to the next one, just because you're justified. Well, what do I mean by justified? You have gone the extra mile. There is no reason for this person to be treating you that way. I mean, you've put all that together, so you really are the victim. You really are justified in indulging yourself in some judgment and some of that status. But all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. And I think that's where I would encourage you to go on that. You really have to learn to discipline yourself. There's got to be a strength internally. A mental, spiritual strength that says, no, if I'm going to walk in love, I have to choose what would be helpful, what would make a positive difference. And the last thing you want to do is go into victim status.
Right. So take every thought captive.
Absolutely take every thought captive.
Okay.
And again, when you're in the middle of pain, that is hard to do. So let me flip it. I've been doing a lot of the talking here, and you've just been throwing questions at me. You're there. You've been beat up, knocked around. You're trying to restrain your lips. And so because you know that what you can or will say would not be helpful.
Right. Might
be justified. Might be truth. Might be something you thought should be helpful, but you know it's not going to be helpful. So now I'm trying to take my thoughts captive. You're there.
Right.
You've had some experience.
Right.
What do you do to try to take thoughts captive and keep it in a better place?
One thing that I try to keep into perspective is that we don't fight against flesh and blood, but against the principalities of the earth. So, like, even if it is me and you type of, it's not really me and you. Like, because if we were in a better place, we wouldn't want to hurt each other or whatnot. And so trying to just shut it down, which then again I come off controlling because I've said, okay, we're not going to talk about this anymore or whatnot. But it's still like, because that's what I need to get my perspective back into place.
And I always talk about get your own heart right first. And so that's what you're talking about, and you're trying to work through that. Another thing that I talk about a lot is the spirit realm is a multiplier. So when you talk about Ephesians chapter 6, and you're talking about we're not fighting against flesh and blood, it feels like this is a conversation between you and me.
Right.
And it feels like it's just us, and so it all should be good there. But when you factor in the spirit realm, as soon as bitterness comes in, you know that there are demonic spirits that are energizing that bitterness. And so where you might have had a small offense, before long, that thing's energized and it's off the charts. And that's what you're talking about when you're talking about, okay, I have to remember that this is not this person talking to me. This is this person plus demonic energizing. So what the person is saying is not necessarily what he or she would want to say.
Right. So then if that's what I know, then how can I proceed without seeming controlling? I mean, because shutting down the conversation.
Well, it depends on what you mean seeming controlling. Chances are you're going to seem controlling regardless.
Okay.
So that's the first thing, is that if the other person's offended, especially if they're using and they're in a zone, they're going to make those accusations because they've had success in the past controlling you with those accusations.
Okay.
So the first thing that you have to take a look at there is yourself, and just saying, okay, am I setting healthy boundaries? Am I doing what I should be doing? Am I doing what I need to be doing to give the other person the best chance of success? And again, the other person's offended. Sometimes that means I'm going to back out of the situation as quickly as I can, as cleanly as I can, in as non-offensive way as I can. And so can you be accused of being controlling at that point? Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things you have to step back and realize, okay, this is likely going to come at me in this way. I can't get offended. I can't be controlled. I need to look at healthy boundaries. And I think that's where you focus. You push away the accusations. You push away the excess emotion, which is going to be there with the demonic energizing and the multiplication of the spirit realm. You push that back and you ask, what's helpful? What's the right thing to do? If you can get it simplified back to that, that makes a big difference.
Okay. Great.
Another thing that you said that I want to comment on, you talked about, again, recognizing it's not that person. Another principle is don't take it personally.
Right.
And we talk about that a lot, and we invariably, we think about, especially if you're a codependent, we think about, look at all I've invested, look at all I've done, and I'll take it another layer. Look at all I've suffered through on behalf of you. I have laid down my life. I have been generous. I have been kind. You know, I mean, all of those kinds of things that you go through. And so you've got all of that stored up inside of you. And it's so easy to feel justified at that point. So then when the other person begins to pick at you, poke at you, try to expose you, at some point, because of the all I have done, it now feels like a complete personal attack. I have done this. I've invested this. It's personal now. And I will tell you, as soon as you go to it's personal now, you've lost.
Yeah.
The other person is lost. There's almost nothing good that can come out of it.
So keeping the focus on that it's not a personal, and that it's just it is spiritual, being energized.
Well, personal for you has to go back to, oh, it's my fault, or as a caregiver, I should have known better, I should have done something better, or I raised you badly, or, you know, I mean, all of the different things that go there. When I personalize it, and people don't realize this, but what I'm actually doing, I'm bringing it back to me. And generally, the most helpful thing you can do, even if it's a child, even if it's somebody that's like, oh, I do have some personal responsibility, I'm culpable for some of what's going on. Generally, what you have to realize is every person responds out of their own heart. So that person right now is not responding to you. That's so important for you to think about and realize. They're responding according to who they are. They're responding according to their own heart. So you're over here taking it personally. It's like, I did this, and you're responding to me this way. You're now saying I'm a bad parent. You're now saying I'm not capable of loving you. Yeah, that's what we do when we personalize. We look at that other person's response, and that other person's response now becomes a comment on us that is insulting.
So it's a reflection of what's going on in our heart. Our responses are.
It's normal humanity.
Yeah.
Normal humanity is, if you love me, I feel like I've received value from you. I'm like, oh, wow, she loves me. There's something special about me. There's something good. What did I just do? I personalized it.
Right.
And frankly, that's part of who God has designed us to be. Sometimes the things that God has designed for a positive end up being a negative. So part of the way I am, value cannot be achieved, it must be received.
Okay.
Part of the way I've been created to receive from you. And so you love me, you affirm me. I'm able to receive that as value. I'm able to be built up. On the positive side, that's all. Oh, that's really cool. That's good. Same principle works on the negative side. When we're getting negative feedback, we almost instinctively go, oh, what's wrong with me? I must be a loser. This must be bad. Now again, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. If I start going there and I start dwelling on that, guess where you will end up?
Victim mode.
Victim mode, angry, controlling,
Bitter.
Bitter, all of the different places like that. So what's interesting, on the positive end, it's helpful for you to receive value and nurture from people through this same tendency.
Mm-hmm.
But on the negative end, if you allow, especially if you're surrounded by wounded, hurting, broken people, if you're surrounded by that, then you allow them to define you instead of God, instead of the voice of God, the presence of God, the life of God. You allow them to define you. This is what happens when you take it personally. When you allow them to define you, it will utterly destroy you, and it will destroy your capacity to be any good for that person or anyone else for that matter.
Right.
Feel like I'm doing way too much of the talking here. You're just kind of responding to some of the different things here, but let me just kind of throw it out. What you have somebody out there that is struggling with this area of they like to help, but they find themselves helping in ways that's destructive. What would your number one piece of advice be to that person?
Pray for sure. And just look at, I think you had talked about it one day, that illustration of teaching someone to fish versus just fishing for them all the time. That's what, like, it's harder, and depending on what our gifts are, depends on, like, if I'm a servant, I think you had mentioned it, that it's easier for me to do it and just get it done than to allow someone else to do it. But we've got to take that time to do it just like we would as a child. And what we were talking about last time, I don't remember exactly what it was, and I'll look at the note. Yeah, it was about enabling. And I was thinking maybe the arrested development, when people get stuck somewhere, those are the, I think of a child that I would walk through and teach them to get dressed or put their shoes on or whatnot. Like, if we have areas in our life because of traumas or whatever that we have that arrested development, we do kind of have to find someone who has those skills that can walk with us to learn those things, right?
What I'm hearing you say is heart change.
Yeah.
With children, I mean, it's easy that, okay, hand-eye coordination. The hand has to go to the mouth, and then I pick up the spoon and I bring food to the mouth, and of course everything else during that period of time. But I learn line by line. I learn what's happening. I have that development. What we don't realize is heart change. We don't realize spiritual development a lot of times. And so the ability to develop trust and quality relationships and receive value and those kind of things are all out there. So when those things aren't happening, you're not going to get where you need to go. And what people want, especially addicts, what they want is just give me the ABCs, tell me these 3 things that I can do, and if I can do those things, I'll be successful. The most successful thing you can do at that point is give them boundaries, really tight, rigid boundaries. And they say, well, if I just live in these really tight, rigid boundaries the rest of my life, maybe I won't drink again. Maybe I won't use again. Well, who wants to live in those kind of tight, rigid boundaries?
Right.
We want to grow up. We want to grow up into adults. So if I can go back, as you said, and I can help them begin to see, oh, you struggle in this area of trust, which means that you have almost no relationships that are close relationships. And what about close relationships? They're the place where we get value sewn into us, where we begin to feel good about ourselves. So you're really struggling with your identity. You're really struggling with your worth. And then I get back the language of heart change. Okay, we have to address these pieces. It's much easier to give boundaries.
Right.
It's much easier to give some immediate solutions. And I get some immediate progress, and and you helped me, so you can feel good
Right.
about that. I mean, that's a lot easier than the servant who wants to jump in and do it for their children, going, no, I need to teach these kids to walk it through themselves.
Right.
And so, yes, holding back from that is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to hold back from that. And I think just the whole heart change language is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I think it helps people begin to realize, oh, I need to develop communication skills. I need to develop the ability to trust. I was just speaking with someone before this program. I need to develop the ability to focus.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't focus, if you're ADD and you have 10,000 things going on in your brain at one time, it's going to be almost impossible to get healthy. So then I have to take 30 days or whatever it takes, 6 years, no. I have to take the period of time to get to where I slow down that craziness in my brain to where I'm able to focus. That's a huge part of heart change that we don't necessarily talk about.
Well, and I think that would be helpful too for somebody, to not enable, is to realize that the heart change is what's going to make the difference so that we have long-term changes, other than just those, like, because boundaries and whatnot seem so tangible, and we don't want that.
And again,
So-
heart change, I build my walk with God. I build my relationship with God so that I'm drawing strength there, because at some point there's a part of you that only God can or will give. I learned to develop communication skills, connection, relationship with people. I call it many eggs in my basket. Most people, if they either have no eggs, they have no quality relationships, or they have one or two. Then anytime that one or two eggs become stressed a little bit, why, next thing you know, we've got scrambled eggs. You know, I mean, the eggs are broken, the basket's a mess. You need multiple eggs in your basket so that you have a team. These are all parts of heart change and developing that. And how many people do I say, oh, I'm never joining a church again, or I'm never this or that, because they didn't have those relationship skills put together. So they've got this struggle with their identity, struggle with their self-worth, struggle then with self-control, and next thing you know, we have real problems.
Right.
As you think about yourself, is there anything that helped you more than anything else? You're clearly getting more healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So what helped you get into a better place?
Well, I know it sounds extreme, but my dad, since I can remember, he always would tell me, you always have a choice. You can even stop breathing, your body will take over, but that's even a choice. And so to think about that was great, but really getting involved with here and learning. I loved going through the Making Room for God one, because that one was it was one of the first lessons, I think, but just talking about how you to check in spiritually and how it's just like a light switch. And that was just, so I didn't have to sit down, and if the day didn't allow an hour, or I wasn't disciplined enough for an hour or whatnot, like I didn't have to do those things. It was just check in with God, just point my spirit that way or whatnot type of, and that really made a difference. And like you were saying, with all the heart change, I had tangibly done all these things to keep my life straight or whatnot, but there was so much underlining. And so that, finding how many areas there were for God to move has made a difference.
And you mentioned it earlier. I think that connection with God, slowing it down, the connection with God enabled you, gave you the ability to slow it down, to not have to respond, or to at least wait on the response. I assume that was helpful there.
Yes, very much, because sometimes I think I know something, but I don't have anything to articulate it. And so a lot of the things that I've learned here has validated, yes, that is the correct way. Like, even I remember for a long time, I was just like crying that I wanted peace, and I didn't really know what that meant. And then going through the spiritual foundations, where it talked about safety, and I was like, I've never felt safe. That's what I've been crying for, and not known how to, so then it helped navigate that, because it helps slow it down to a place of focus.
And that's a little bit what we've already been talking about. If you're able to break it down, A lot of times the only thing we give people is boundaries. But if you're able to break down, okay, I had arrested development, you brought that up, and so I'm not able to trust, I'm not able to draw strength, I don't have that ability. And the key thing, when helping hurts, the key thing is to be able to slow it down, to be able to get that time with God to where you're able to go, this is not the time. I mean, there's a lot of times when you'll feel the hand of God saying, no, no, quiet, hold up,
Yeah.
you're laughing at that one.
Yeah, it's because I hear that a lot, especially because the God's. I mean, just I don't know. It was August or September where I had a moment, and that was what I mean. God really just very blatantly 3 days in a row. It was just very hard. This is a message I've been trying to talk to you about, and so try to keep it at the forefront of my mind. So then I'm like, yes, okay, just stop talking.
And really that slowing down process, that quieting, learning to connect with God, learning to draw strength, that sows a sense of value into you to where now, oh, I don't have to get a response from this person. I don't have to be validated by there. I can actually be led by God. I can slow my brain down, make better choices, and that's what's been happening in you.
Yes, I mean, and the it's not just the peace that I have, but what I see out of other people, their reactions towards me, or when on moments where I know I didn't say anything and I should have, from my own point of view, but God was like, "Be quiet," and the positive. I mean, because God's in there doing things, and the Holy Spirit's ministering to them. I don't have to do it, so it's been good.
And when helping hurts, if you follow your own instincts, you would not be doing that.
Right.
And when you follow your own instincts, you see the outcomes of
Yes.
following your own instincts. And so just learning to respond to God. And then the other thing we talked about, learning to respond to godly people, getting counselors, advisors that you can go to, that you can talk about, and you delay saying the things until you've gotten a different perspective and some advice. I mean, that's so powerful.
Right. Yeah. Good stuff.
What's kind of cool, we have these instincts in us that tell us that we're right, and learning to get those slowed down and quieted down. Once you've been through that, and you've had this experience, once you've been through that, are you feeling more confidence? In other words, do you see God at work? Do you see a different set of results as you're following these pathways?
Yeah, definitely a different set of results. Like I was mentioning, the people on moments where I, should have, in my own point of view, should have said something, and then knowing how it previously worked out, it just escalated things. Instead of when I don't say anything and I lay it at God's feet, then there's peace, and they come back responding more positively, like God did something instead of me. So that's been fantastic. You asked two things. Okay.
And I love that God did something. I mean,
Yeah.
that's so powerful. When we believe we've done something, guess what? Then the next time we're going to believe we need to do something. So when we're able to respond to God and God did something, then the next time it's going to be easier to wait on God. And many times with codependence, that I have to act, I have to do something.
Well, and that's the thing is it's actually more freeing because I do less because God does more. But then, like, if I allow my natural to take over, then I'm not doing enough, and that self-talk can happen. So then it's just, no, I'm being obedient to God, letting God be God. It's way better. And so it's taking those thoughts captive.
The greatest thing you can do for your children is to be a woman of God and to follow Him, to walk it through, to obey.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been fun.
Yes.
It's certainly you've walked the experience, so it's I enjoyed probing you a little bit and that, and of course you throw most of those back my direction, so I've talked quite a bit, but hopefully as we turn to you, it's been helpful. When you're codependent and you have that need to help, it can be really difficult to shut that down. And if you listen to some of the principles that we talk about, you can quiet your brain, you can get to a point to where you can hear from God, begin to take those steps when God says to take them. It's just so much more powerful than when we're responding to our own instincts. Again, quick reminder, I'll actually be out next week, and so we won't have any live streams next week. And then on Sunday following that, on October 15th, 6 p.m., Brianna Smith is going to be sharing a testimony and working with the Living Acts materials. And then, of course, the retreat at the end of the month, Overcoming, which is October 27 to 29. Check it out on our website, livefreeministries.com. And then also the November graduation. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for passing it on to people who need to hear the message. And we will see you next time on Heart Change You live stream.